When young Jock exposed the secret affair between Kendra and Scrappy, it wasn't just their personal lives that were turned upside down. The impact spread to their careers, public image, and social media presence as well. Jock's revelation of receipts threw Kendra and Scrappy into a media frenzy that directly questioned their credibility and integrity. The scandal had reached a point where their previous actions couldn't be ignored anymore. Kendra, who was once known for her strong and independent persona, now found herself having to answer for her actions. The media was attacking her from all sides, and fans who had previously admired her were now turning against her. Kendra tried to justify her actions, but the harsh light of truth made her attempts seem weak. Her social media posts became the subject of intense criticism, and people were questioning her character and decisions. She had become the center of a storm that seemed impossible to weather. When Kendra reached out to her PR team to help handle the media fallout, it became clear that this wasn't a simple situation. The first thing her team recognized was that Kendra needed to publicly acknowledge her mistakes. There was no way around it. If she kept defending her image without taking responsibility, the situation would only get worse. However, the scrutiny from the media was so intense that every move Kendra made had to be carefully calculated. As she gave interviews trying to clear her name, each attempt seemed to push her fans even further away, rather than restoring their trust. Fans began to feel that she was more focused on protecting her image than genuinely understanding and owning her mistakes. Meanwhile, Scrappy's situation was even more complicated. After Jock exposed his affair, Scrappy had chosen to remain silent, thinking that by doing so, he could avoid the drama. However, this silence was doing more harm than good. Scrappy's silence quickly became a major point of contention, with fans growing increasingly frustrated with his lack of response. His fans were now questioning whether he was trying to avoid responsibility for his actions. Silence, which he once thought was a safe choice, was now starting to hurt his career. Scrappy had an opportunity to clarify his side of the story, but by remaining silent, he was missing the chance to regain control over the narrative. Jock's situation was vastly different. When he exposed Kendra and Scrappy's affair, he positioned himself as an honest and brave individual. Jock didn't shy away from the controversy. Instead, he turned it into an opportunity to highlight his authenticity. He focused on his career and music, sending a clear message that he was not just a reality TV star, but a successful artist and businessman as well. Jock's decision to put everything on display earned him the support of his fans, who admired his willingness to be open and transparent. Jock, by revealing the truth, had won the backing of his audience, which ultimately helped him rebuild his career in the aftermath of the scandal. But while Jock was on the rise, Kendra and Scrappy were facing the tough task of rebuilding their image. For Kendra and Scrappy, this was the pivotal moment to take responsibility for their actions. Kendra spoke with her PR team, urging them to tell the truth to the fans, but by then, the truth had already been leaked by the media. What could have been a controlled revelation now felt like a curse. Kendra was beginning to realize that the longer she tried to defend herself without accepting her mistakes, the worse things would get. She had to face the truth and acknowledge her faults if she wanted to have any chance of moving forward. Scrappy also had to take action. His silence had been deafening, and it was doing him no favors. He finally began to speak out, but his statements weren't as convincing as they needed to be. Scrappy needed to engage with his fans and show them that he understood his mistakes and was ready to make amends. His fans weren't going to forgive him unless he proved that he was genuinely remorseful. The challenge for Scrappy was that he had to make his private life public in a way that he had always tried to avoid. He had to admit to his faults, face the consequences, and show that he was capable of growth. This transparency wasn't just a matter of making statements. It meant opening up in ways that were difficult for someone who had always kept his personal life out of the spotlight. The key for both Kendra and Scrappy was to acknowledge their mistakes and take responsibility for their actions. Kendra understood that her reputation was on the line, and the longer she avoided confronting the reality of the situation, the worse it would get. She spoke to her PR team, urging them to speak directly to the fans, but she knew that the truth, what the media had already revealed, had become a burden. Kendra realized that she couldn't just deny her past actions anymore. To salvage her career, she would need to own up to them, no matter how difficult that would be. Scrappy, too, faced the difficult task of accepting his mistakes. He had been silent for too long, and now it was time to break that silence. He started making public statements, but they weren't enough to convince his audience. Scrappy needed to engage with his fans more directly, showing them that he was willing to learn from his mistakes and make real changes. It wasn't just about saying the right things, it was about demonstrating through his actions that he was truly remorseful and committed to rebuilding his career. As Kendra and Scrappy tried to navigate this challenging period, they had to deal with the ongoing media pressure. Every interview, every statement, and every social media post was under intense scrutiny. For them, the key to moving forward was not just to respond to the scandal, but to actively work on regaining the trust of their fans. Kendra had to be seen as genuine in her apology and willing to take responsibility. Scrappy had to stop hiding behind his silence and start showing the world that he was willing to face the consequences of his actions. While Kendra and Scrappy struggled to find their footing, Jock's career was moving forward. He had successfully used the controversy to his advantage, rebuilding his public image and focusing on his music and business ventures. Jock's strategy of being upfront with the truth and maintaining his focus on his career allowed him to emerge from the scandal with his reputation intact. His fans admired his authenticity, and they supported him through the fallout. Jock's rise amidst the drama served as a stark contrast to the difficulties Kendra and Scrappy faced. Jock had been open and transparent, which allowed him to regain his audience's trust. Kendra and Scrappy, on the other hand, had to work much harder to rebuild their public image. For Kendra and Scrappy, the road to redemption was long and difficult. They had to face their mistakes head-on and show their fans that they were capable of growth. It wasn't just about offering apologies, it was about proving through their actions that they had learned from their mistakes and were ready to move forward. As the scandal continued to unfold, Kendra and Scrappy found themselves at a crossroads. Their personal lives, once kept behind closed doors, were now the subject of intense public scrutiny. Kendra, who had built her career on being a strong and independent woman, was now facing a crisis of credibility. Scrappy, on the other hand, had remained silent for too long, and the media was growing impatient with his lack of response. Both of them had to confront their mistakes head-on, but the journey toward redemption wasn't going to be easy. For Kendra, the challenge was multifaceted. She had to rebuild not only her public image, but also her relationship with her fans. Fans who had once supported her were now questioning her loyalty, her honesty, and her integrity. The affair with Scrappy, which she had tried to keep hidden, was now out in the open, and there was no denying the truth anymore. Kendra realized that to move forward, she had to own up to her actions and make amends, not just through words, but through consistent and genuine actions. At first, Kendra attempted to address the scandal through social media. She posted heartfelt messages explaining her side of the story and asking for forgiveness. However, her efforts were met with mixed reactions. While some fans expressed their support, many others were still skeptical. They felt that Kendra was trying to control the narrative without truly facing the consequences of her actions. The posts she made seemed more like damage control than genuine remorse. The more she tried to explain herself, the more it seemed like she was avoiding the real issue, the affair itself. Kendra soon realized that her public relations strategy needed a major overhaul. She had to shift from justifying her behavior to genuinely accepting responsibility. The PR team advised her to focus on showing vulnerability and admitting her mistakes without trying to make excuses. The goal wasn't just to make her fans believe her. It was to prove that she understood the gravity of the situation. This shift in approach would require Kendra to be more authentic, to speak from the heart, and to demonstrate through her actions that she was learning from her past mistakes. Scrappy's situation was more complicated. Unlike Kendra, Scrappy had chosen to remain silent for much of the drama. This silence, which he believed would shield him from the backlash, only made things worse. The longer he stayed quiet, the more people speculated about his involvement in the affair, his motivations, and his lack of remorse. Fans were frustrated with his lack of transparency, and the media was starting to portray him as someone who was trying to hide behind his silence, rather than face the music. At some point, Scrappy realized that his silence was not going to help him. If he wanted to salvage his career, he had to speak up and take ownership of his actions. But where did he begin? What could he say to regain the trust of his fans and clear his name? The pressure to come up with the right words was immense. Scrappy knew that if he didn't handle this carefully, his career could be over. He started by reaching out to his closest supporters, asking for advice on how to approach the situation. He consulted with friends, family, and colleagues, trying to figure out the best way to navigate the storm. Eventually, he realized that he needed to be straightforward with his fans. He could no longer hide behind his silence or make vague statements. Scrappy made the decision to release a public apology. In his message, he acknowledged the affair and expressed genuine remorse for his actions. He admitted that he had hurt people, including Kendra, his fans, and his own family. He apologized for keeping his silence for so long and vowed to make things right. The apology was a turning point for Scrappy. Although it wasn't easy for him to admit his mistakes publicly, he knew it was the only way forward. He followed up with actions, making it clear that he was committed to doing better. Scrappy began engaging more with his fans on social media, responding to their questions and showing that he was open to criticism. He also focused on rebuilding his career by returning to his roots in music and working on new projects. Slowly but surely, Scrappy started to regain the trust of his fans, though it was clear that it would take time to fully repair the damage done. The media, however, was still relentless. Both Kendra and Scrappy were under constant pressure to prove that they were truly sorry for what had transpired. Every move they made was being watched and analyzed. Kendra, in particular, found herself under the microscope. While her apology had been a step in the right direction, it wasn't enough to quiet the critics. Many felt that her actions spoke louder than her words, and they were waiting for her to demonstrate true change. To prove her sincerity, Kendra took further steps to show her commitment to personal growth. She started participating in charity events, using her platform to raise awareness for causes she cared about. She also began to focus more on her career, taking on new business ventures and exploring opportunities outside of reality TV. This shift in focus helped to improve her image as fans began to see that Kendra was serious about moving forward and making positive changes in her life. She worked hard to rebuild her reputation, but it was clear that her journey was far from over. Scrappy, too, had to prove himself through consistent action. While his apology was a step in the right direction, he knew that he had to keep showing his fans that he was serious about his redemption. He continued to work on his music and put in the effort to engage with his audience. He also worked on improving his relationships with the people closest to him, including his family and friends. For Scrappy, rebuilding his career wasn't just about fixing his public image, it was about mending the personal relationships that had been damaged by the affair. As both Kendra and Scrappy continued their efforts to make amends, the reality of the situation began to set in. Redemption was not going to come quickly or easily. It would require hard work, consistency, and a genuine commitment to change. The road ahead was long, and there would be many challenges along the way. But both Kendra and Scrappy were determined to prove that they could overcome the scandal and rebuild their careers. For Jock, the whole situation was a reminder of the complexities of fame and the challenges that come with living life under the public's gaze. Jock had managed to emerge from the scandal unscathed, but he understood the pressure that Kendra and Scrappy were under. He knew that the road to redemption was never straightforward, and it would take time for his former friends to fully recover. Jock's success in handling the situation was largely due to his transparency and willingness to face the truth, something that Kendra and Scrappy would need to adopt if they wanted to make a full recovery. As Kendra and Scrappy navigated their individual journeys toward redemption, they each had to contend with their own internal struggles. Kendra had to confront the reality that her actions had hurt not only others, but herself as well. She needed to rebuild the trust that had been lost, and that was not going to be easy. Scrappy, too, had to face the consequences of his silence and the damage it had caused. He needed to prove that he was more than just the mistakes he had made. Both of them knew that the journey ahead would not be easy, but with the right mindset and the determination to make things right, they could eventually find their way back to redemption. As the weeks turned into months, Kendra and Scrappy continued their efforts to rebuild their public image and careers, but the process of redemption wasn't without its challenges. Both were now living in the aftermath of the scandal, trying to navigate the tricky waters of public perception and personal accountability. They had taken steps to apologize and make amends, but the road to full recovery would be long and filled with hurdles. For Kendra, the journey toward redemption had become a test of patience and resilience. She had learned that earning back the trust of her fans wasn't something that could happen overnight. She was no longer just dealing with the fallout from her affair with Scrappy, but also facing the larger challenge of proving to the public that she was capable of growth. It wasn't enough for Kendra to apologize once and expect everything to go back to normal. She needed to demonstrate that her actions matched her words and that she was willing to make long-term changes. Kendra decided to take a step back from the reality TV spotlight. She had been a part of the industry for years, but the scandal had forced her to reevaluate her career. While she still enjoyed the attention and opportunities that came with being in the public eye, Kendra realized that her personal growth was more important. She chose to focus on developing new business ventures, such as fashion and lifestyle brands, while working on her personal life. Her time away from the cameras allowed her to reflect on her mistakes and grow in ways she hadn't expected. As she worked on these new ventures, she used her platform to promote causes that mattered to her. Her charitable work allowed her to start rebuilding her reputation, as fans saw that she wasn't just focused on her own recovery, but also on making a positive impact on the world around her. But even as Kendra tried to move forward, the weight of her past was never too far behind. Every public appearance, every interview, every social media post was still scrutinized by the media and her followers. Kendra couldn't afford to make any missteps. Every time she posted something on Instagram, it was dissected. Every time she spoke in an interview, her words were analyzed. The pressure was immense, and it was clear that her redemption would require more than just time. It would require unwavering consistency and transparency. She learned that the public's forgiveness is something that has to be continuously earned. Scrappy, too, had a long way to go in his quest for redemption. After his public apology and vow to change, fans were cautiously optimistic, but they were still waiting for him to show through his actions that he was truly sorry. Scrappy understood that he couldn't just rely on his words. He needed to prove that he had learned from his mistakes. While the affair was already out in the open, Scrappy had to show his fans that he was capable of taking responsibility for his actions in all areas of his life. Not just in the affair, but in his relationships, his career, and his personal development. To demonstrate his commitment to change, Scrappy began focusing on his music once again. He worked on new projects, releasing fresh content, and collaborating with other artists to regain his position in the entertainment industry. Music had always been his passion, and it was clear that he wanted to reclaim the public's attention for the right reasons. Scrappy used his music as a platform to express his remorse, his growth, and his desire to move forward. His fans responded positively to the new music, and many began to forgive him for his past mistakes. Scrappy knew, however, that he couldn't rest on his laurels. His music would only take him so far if he didn't continue to prove to his fans that he was committed to being a better person. Beyond music, Scrappy knew that his public image needed significant work. His silence had been one of the biggest issues during the scandal, and he was determined not to make that same mistake again. Scrappy took the time to engage with his fans, responding to their questions and comments in a more authentic and open manner. He also made a point to reconnect with the people who had been closest to him, his family, friends, and loved ones. Scrappy realized that he couldn't rebuild his career if he didn't start by rebuilding his personal relationships. He worked hard to make amends with those who had been hurt by his actions, including Kendra, who had also been affected by the affair. As the months passed, Kendra and Scrappy slowly began to regain the trust of their fans. It wasn't easy, and it didn't happen quickly, but they were making progress. Both of them had taken different paths to redemption, but they shared a common goal to prove that they had learned from their mistakes and were worthy of forgiveness. But while their personal journeys toward redemption were taking shape, there was still the looming question of their future in the entertainment industry. The public's attention span is short, and people's memories of scandals fade with time, but that doesn't mean that Kendra and Scrappy were guaranteed to find their way back to the top. They still had to fight to reclaim their place in the industry. For Kendra, the shift from reality TV star to entrepreneur was a smart move. It allowed her to control her narrative and focus on her strengths, away from the constant scrutiny of the reality TV cameras. She began to build a new identity for herself, one that was focused on business and philanthropy rather than drama and scandal. Her fans, who had followed her throughout the ups and downs of her public life, appreciated the change. Many of them admired her ability to reinvent herself and move forward in a positive direction. Scrappy, on the other hand, had to navigate the delicate balance of returning to the limelight without being defined by the scandal. His path was not as clear as Kendra's. The entertainment industry is notoriously fickle, and while Scrappy was making a comeback with his music, he knew that he couldn't rely on past fame alone to carry him through. He had to prove that he was more than just the controversies that surrounded him. Scrappy had to show that he had grown, that he had learned from his mistakes, and that he was worthy of a second chance. He wasn't just asking for forgiveness. He was fighting to regain his career, his reputation, and his place in the public eye. At the end of the day, both Kendra and Scrappy understood that redemption was not a destination, but a journey. They had made mistakes, but they were committed to proving that they were capable of change. Whether or not they would fully succeed remained to be seen. What was clear, however, was that they were determined to take control of their own narratives and not let a scandal define the rest of their lives. As the drama unfolded, Kendra and Scrappy continued to face challenges, but with each step they took toward redemption, they learned more about themselves and their resilience. They discovered that their worth wasn't determined by their past mistakes, but by their ability to rise above them and create a better future. And as they continued on their journey, they became living examples of the power of growth, change, and the importance of second chances. What do you think? Can Kendra and Scrappy truly redeem themselves? Or will the shadows of their past always follow them? Their story is far from over, and the real question is, what comes next for them? As they continue to fight for forgiveness and rebuild their careers, we'll be here to update you every step of the way. If you want to stay up to date with the latest updates on Kendra and Scrappy's journey, make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. You won't want to miss what happens next. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you believe in second chances? Can people truly change and grow from their mistakes? Drop a comment below and let us know your perspective. We want to hear your opinions. Also, if you found this video interesting, give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Let's get more people talking about redemption and growth. Thank you for watching, and remember, every journey towards redemption is unique. Stay tuned for more stories